Some films were harmed in the making of this podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of For Your Consideration, the podcast featuring roundtable discussions reevaluating the cinematic canon of past masterpieces and modern classics. I'm Mike Josick.
And I'm Dustin Friesnan.
Thanks for joining us. So it's been a few weeks since we've had an episode. It's good to be back. We decided this week that since we're kind of on the cusp of Christmas, we would go once again with a themed show, and a perennial favorite, of course, is It's a Wonderful Life.
Otherwise known as that Christmas movie that's on every year that reads as a Christian parable, but is only played because networks can do it for free to make money, aka the embodiment of modern Christmas. But don't worry, unlike It's a Wonderful Life, we're not going to do it every single year.
And we are going to fight every urge to not do our respective Jimmy Stewart impressions. So we don't have any news or below-the-line stuff to cover this time around. So, Dustin, if you don't have anything you need to add, we will go into the credits. The film was directed by Frank Capra, also produced by Frank Capra. Screenplay was by Francis Goodrich, Albert Hackett, and Frank Capra. It starred James Stewart, Donna Reed, Lionel Barrymore, Thomas Mitchell, Henry Travers, Beulah Bondi, Ward Bond, Frank Thalen, and Gloria Graham. Music was by Dimitri Tomkin. Cinematography by Joseph Walker. It was edited by William Hornbeck and released by RKO Radio Pictures on December 20th, 1946. Another Christmas release.
Shocking, I know.
Although this one was kind of planned, so that's not really as funny as it normally is.
It would be funnier, actually, if it wasn't released on Christmas, but was still a Christmas movie.
Now, It's a Wonderful Life is one of the most acclaimed American films ever made. It places number 11 on AFI's Top 100 list. It is also 283rd on Sight and Sound's Critics Poll and 107th on Sight and Sound's Directors Poll. So, Dustin, how did you feel about It's a Wonderful Life?
Going into It's a Wonderful Life, especially knowing the actual history as to why it's played so often, I've always been told that it's not a super Christmas kind of movie, and to an extent it isn't, at least as far as the timing is concerned. The last half takes place during Christmas, but the beginning half of it does not. Christmas doesn't play any sort of theme whatsoever in the movie, but what I was told is that because they didn't have copyright sort of locked down, TV channels did not have to pay in order to show it, and they were like, nobody's watching TV on Christmas anyway, let's throw on this movie, it's free. So I really wasn't expecting much. I was expecting it was sort of a thing that because it's become a tradition, it's there and it's popular for no good reason. And I was actually really surprised to learn that this is a movie that brought a tear to my eye at many, many points. It is a lot more Christmassy, but more traditional Christmassy, because I actually, when I said it was sort of reads as a Christian parable, it really kind of does. It's all about self-sacrifice for the good of the many, which is something that you will read about in most any Christian parable, as opposed to anything that you'd see in any other Christian movie, which they'll talk about family and such. But no, here it's all about self-sacrifice for the good of the many. You can almost consider it sort of a communist parable if you really wanted to, which I suppose they would not appreciate back in the day.
Now, I was curious, while you were doing that little story, I did check online just to see if I could confirm that copyright issue story, and I don't see anything here that says one way or the other that was the case. I'd probably have to do a little bit more digging, but it did become a staple on television in the 70s, and that is ultimately where its sort of mass popularity did come in. And I agree with you that going into this movie, it has a reputation. It is on TV at Christmas every year that I've been alive, so
I know I've always heard about it, but I'd never actually seen it until this very day.
And I've seen clips of it, I've heard people talk about it, I've seen clips of it in other movies where they're talking about seeing clips of it.
I knew the plot of it, and it's like, what does a dude trying to commit suicide have to do with Christmas?
Well, I do think that the message in the film, it does have kind of a Christmassy, happy, joy, don't commit suicide vibe. I do think that it does fit for Christmas. And even if the movie never even hit a Christmas note at the end, I think it still would have been okay as a Christmas movie.
I like how the one song that they had was Old Lang Syne, which is more of a New Year's movie, or sorry, a New Year's song.
Well, there was two songs. Yeah, there was Old Lang Syne and there was Buffalo Girls.
They did Charleston when they had the prom as well.
They did.
Which looks like such a fun dance, I gotta say.
I'm totally going to look into learning the Charleston. But I went into this film and I kind of wasn't sure what to expect. I was kind of primed for like loving it or hating it. I didn't think there'd be sort of any middle ground. I kind of knew exactly what to expect, and I knew nothing of what to expect, which was kind of an interesting way to go into this. And I have to say that I was really pleasantly surprised. I found the writing in this movie is really sharp.
It is superb.
Like this is like Casablanca level structure and writing and quips and drama and melodrama and like the whole deal.
It all feels so very real, which is something that is hard to really capture in a lot of movies.
And even
especially 60, 70 years later.
And even though the characters are even performing at like a slightly heightened level, because this is a movie from the mid-40s, that's where George Lucas gets his faster, more intense from. The films of the 30s and 40s. And, Jimmy Stewart is something of a caricature in most of this movie. Like, there's a lot of broad movements and saying things in very sort of broad ways. But, the film sort of creates its conceit in its world, and it never breaks that. And because the writing is so good, and because the performances are so good, some of the weird little editing ticks, or, I don't think the music...
Oh, sometimes the music was it was insane. It was like, what are you even doing right now?
But it didn't matter. It's kind of like, I don't like cilantro, but if you only put a little bit of cilantro, I can still eat it. Because I don't really notice it, because it just kind of blends in with everything else. And I feel that any of the little kind of warts that this movie might have are so minor compared to sort of its strengths. I think its strengths just sort of wash over that.
It completely overpowers any of the issues. Like, it is fun to note, like, at least twice, I definitely noticed where they spliced together two separate takes of the same scene. And they didn't try to do it by shifting the camera angle at all. They tried to literally, this guy's walking down a hall, and now they're trying to splice it together with him walking down the hall. And it was obvious.
Now, there is a possibility
that the film was damaged and that they don't have a proper original.
Exactly.
Except the distance at which like a face or the body would move, I believe it was too much. That it wouldn't be a natural movement, that they were trying to splice that together.
I'm just saying that may not have been an editor issue. That may have just been a restoration issue. But still.
In theory, it's possible. I'll grant you that. But looking at other things, like the lighting was superb. I never once thought that anything was too dark or too bright. You could always tell exactly what was going on. They didn't have bad, like, day for night shots or anything like that.
I really liked how, near the end, when they were really trying to portray George kind of losing his shit, and that just officially means that I now have to click explicit when I upload this.
I held off for 2 seconds.
Right where everything turns at the end, where George kind of, loses himself in the despair of all the bad things that are kind of happening, they do that sort of low light to give like the stark shadows on his face. Honestly, I think it might be a little hard for Jimmy Stewart to really pull off kind of crazy or angry. He's not really like the abusive wife beater dad sort of stereotype. And I think they just use that lighting to kind of add a little bit of sort of danger.
I certainly felt that he was frantic. He was never, like, ridiculous. But the thing is, that always fit with his character. His character is the nicest person you'll ever meet. He sacrificed everything that he's ever wanted in his life.
It's always at his expense.
Always at his expense, in order to make sure that everyone else in town was doing good. Which is why I say it's sort of a Christian parable sort of thing, the self-sacrifice. It's one of the virtues. He's the most virtuous character you've seen on film probably ever. In fact, the only reason he goes to commit suicide, I always thought it was because he was just sort of miserably depressed. But no, because the villain of the movie, Mr. Potter, stole his money that was lost. They were about to be foreclosed. He was about to be thrown in jail, but he knew that he had that life insurance policy. And when Mr. Potter said, "You're worth more dead than alive," he was like, "Shit, you're right. If I die, then they get this thing here. The business stays open. We're all good. I'll just sacrifice of myself, I'll die for everyone else's sins. I'm Jesus.
Speaking of Mr. Potter being the bad guy and the lost, air quote, lost money, I actually really appreciated the fact that he didn't get his comeuppance in kind of a traditional, maybe while George was wandering the town, he discovered, oh, it was this guy who took the money so that when he comes back, he can go and challenge him. Potter still has the money.
Potter still makes it out on top. He's still rich. He's still the same douchebag he ever was. He never learned a single lesson this entire movie.
But the story's not about Potter.
But also, that's sort of a more true ending to how the world works.
Exactly.
That good people can still cause good around them. Mr. Bailey saved the entire town, or at least a good chunk of the poorer section of town, and made a significant difference in his entire life. He just didn't see it. And that's something that certainly a lot of people will have a hard time seeing, the effect that they have on others. His effect was so widespread that when the world was shifted to a world without him, it wasn't even snowing. Butterfly effect.
Film has good communist message.
It's very good. But one thing I do have to say, like, of all the good characters, even like the kid characters, I enjoyed them when they were young. I loved their acting. I loved the stuff that they did.
Like young George and young Mary. Yeah, that was
young
great
George
stuff.
And Mary. Fantastic stuff. I'm always against kid actors. They always drive me nuts. Even his kids, they were a little more sideline, not as good, but still not bad. But Clarence comes into the picture. Clarence is the angel, and he is the worst angel in the world. He doesn't give two craps about Bailey. All he wants is his wings. He says that to him. He's like, man, that kind of talk isn't going to get me my wings. You're not going to make this easy, are you? It's like, wow. You are a terrible angel, sir.
Now, this is a mild digression, but out of all the movies that we've done so far, you have mentioned before that you've enjoyed child actors in some of the previous films. So It's a Wonderful Life is one of them. You remember
Haley Joel Osment in Sixth Sense I enjoyed.
You dug his performance in that?
Both of his performances, yes.
In both of his performances? Oh, that's right.
Yes. As Murtaugh and as the scared kid who doesn't know what's going on.
Was Jaws another one?
There was barely kids in Jaws.
There was.
Certainly not memorable. I don't think I enjoyed them, though. I don't remember enjoying the kids in Jaws. They were there to fill sort of a little quota, if anything.
It's a weird thing to talk about enjoying children.
I do not enjoy children.
Maybe it was a horror movie. Yeah, Halloween. It was Halloween. We dug the little kids in the Rob Zombie Halloween.
That might be one of these things that makes a classic movie for me. If you can wrangle these kids, if you can make these kids do well, you're good enough to do everything else.
Kids and animals.
Kids and animals. That's where everything... Well, animals... I've seen bad animal movies where the animals are trained superb. Come on now. Come on, Mike. Come on.
I have no comment. I can't think of a single movie right now that would exemplify that.
Then you obviously have not been watching enough Cinema Snob, because there's some bad talking animal movies out there.
I have not been watching Cinema Snob.
Homeward Bound, on the other hand, I remember enjoying a lot. Back to Clarence, though, and how he's the worst angel in history.
I wasn't sure what I was going to think of Clarence. First off, I find it very interesting. Okay, this is going to be like a multi-layered comment or multifaceted comment. So at the very beginning of the movie, when the little star clusters are talking, and by the way, I can't help but think that that was probably what influenced the Futurama episode where they've got God talking to Bender, where it's just a cluster of stars that are blinking.
Also, these stars are shticky. They are so much shtick.
So while they're talking, they say, you've got about an hour, so let's get you up to speed. Which I find interesting because that means the movie sort of runs in real time, because it takes about an hour for Clarence and the audience to get to George on the bridge.
And in the meantime, they even pause it at one moment just to look at his face. And at that part, it actually looked like a drawing, but they pause it at one part just so he's, look at that face. Yeah, I really like that face. That's a good face.
I did feel that was really clever in structuring it. Whether that was intentional or not, it probably was.
I think it is.
And then when Clarence shows up, it's like, here's a character that hasn't really been embodied by anything other than a disembodied voice. And here's a character that you're supposed to accept as now a part of the film. And I think he does a really good job for somebody who hasn't been around for like an hour and a bit. He just drops into the movie and he's entertaining, he fits in, he is interacting well with the other actors, and it doesn't actually break the movie.
It works within the movie, but I just can't help but feel like to him, it's a job, and he's annoyed with it. It's like, I gotta save another guy? I guess. And it feels so like day to day to him, and it's amusing, but at the same time, if you're an angel, in theory, that is your day to day, and it's almost nice to know that up in heaven, even their bureaucratic nonsense bores them. Nothing changes.
I do think that you're maybe nitpicking on the wings thing. I didn't get the same sense that you did.
Maybe it's just the shift of tone for me, because at that point, I cared a whole hell of a lot about Jimmy Stewart's character. Like, I was tearing up throughout the last half hour of this movie. Like, it was all very meaningful to me. And then this guy comes in with his shtick, and it's like, dude, come on.
But Henry Travers' performance as Clarence, I think he did a really good job of walking that tightrope between the broad comedy and the high drama, because he does the moments where, he's biting the cop's hand. And by the way, when I was researching online the whole Bert and Ernie thing, apparently somebody who did work for the Henson Productions did say he believes that was a coincidence. Maybe it was something that was just in the back of somebody's head that thought, Bert and Ernie go really well together. Who knows how it happened?
When we noticed in that scene, we noticed simultaneously, the cop and the driver. It's like, Bert, Ernie. What?
Because up until then, those characters don't get named like that together. And then all of a sudden, he's just shouting their names, and we both just looked at each other. It's like...
But amusingly, they're always together. In every scene you see Ernie, there's Bert. And every scene where there's Bert, there's Ernie.
But just quickly back to Henry Travers' performance. I think he walks that tightrope, and I think he balances both really, really well, because he does the really, really silly stuff. But when he's standing there and he's trying to tell George that he's been given this gift and trying to convince him, like, hey, this is actually happening. This is not just some weird like dream that you're having. This is happening, and it's real, and this is what the world would be like without you. He sells it.
I'll agree that he does walk it quite well. And you do feel that he does care, and he's trying to convince him. And unlike the gatekeeper or the bridge keeper, like he's a bit harder to convince.
That bridge guy was great.
The bridge guy was great.
Every time he leans forward to spit, and then he's just like...
And then he falls backwards off his chair. He's like, you know what? I don't need this angels and suicide kind of stuff. No, I'm out of here. I'm done. I'm going home.
It's Christmas.
It's Christmas. No boats are going through here anyway. Whatever. I don't care.
I also liked how this movie, it has a genuine darkness to it. I mean...
Absolutely.
A, it's built almost entirely around the premise of this man committing suicide. B, you've got Mr. Gower at the beginning who almost poisons that kid with the diphtheria.
And of course, in the alternate version, he does and goes to jail for 20 years.
And he's drinking and angry because his son has died from influenza.
And beats this kid.
He beats the kid.
He was bleeding from his ear.
And you've got all of these people who are living in the slums. And then when George is never born, Bedford Falls turns into Pottersville. And Pottersville is basically Sin City. It's basically one big red light district.
And his whole community is now a graveyard where his younger brother was, and his younger brother couldn't save the people in the war because he didn't save his brother, and just there's a lot of death.
It's dark. And it doesn't go, to like Martin Scorsese territory, but like for the time and for Frank Capra, I mean, it was handled really interestingly, I think.
And every good thing that happens in this movie is built off of his back. Everybody else who succeeds, it's either because of him or they don't mention anything that benefits anyone else from their success. Like his one buddy who goes off, does the whole plastics thing, becomes rich.
It's funny, I was actually just going to bring up Sam.
He's about to help him at the end. He's like, I'll loan you $25,000. That's all fine and dandy. No, not a gift, but a loan.
I don't think George would have wanted a gift, though.
He wouldn't have. I don't know. He might have wanted a gift.
At that point, maybe. But
I mean, your buddy's rich. Like, he can afford at least something. But the thing is, everyone was coming in with a gift. The entire community, everybody that helped, was coming in to help pay off this $9,000. In
the same way that we were talking about how they sort of subverted that villain role with Potter, how Potter essentially got away with it, they kind of do the same with Sam, because they build Sam up as romantic competition for George. Then Sam has that, hey, invest all your money. And I thought for sure they were going to invest money and they were going to lose money. But it turns out Sam actually like invests in plastics and does really, really well and becomes rich. And they stay kind of friends. And
it almost looked like he might have been a Deus Ex coming in at the end. Oh, I'm rich. I got this telegram. I'm all good. No, he wasn't the one who saved him. It was the entire town.
And it was nice that Sam didn't turn into like something to rub George's nose into. And it was also nice that the town was able to basically get behind George and make the donations and the gifts in order to save the business and keep George out of jail. But then to also have Sam say, I can wire you the money, which just means that
he's just got so much social equity. He's got, as they say, he's the richest person in town because he's got all this social equity, which is something that Potter does not have. But Sam does inadvertently rub some stuff in his face earlier on when they're just walking around. He's like, oh, hey, come down here. And he's like, oh, I can't. We'll be too busy. Sort of rubs his face. I don't mean to rub your face in it. You know, come down to New York and blah, blah, blah. And while leaving, he kicks his door closed, like just in anger, because all he's ever wanted to do his entire life is go out and explore the world. But now he's in this crapsack town and he's hated every minute of it.
Everybody has gotten out except him.
And here's this person living the exact life he wanted to. The one thing that he does have in town that he does love is Mary. And that is actually a really sweet romance. Once he gets past the weird part at the beginning where he's trying to take out somebody else on his way to Mary's place.
Maybe it's because we've done this for a while, but we're clicking so well where you are segueing me into everything that I want to talk about.
I'm beating you to the punch. It's a race.
The Mary and George relationship, this has become one of my favorite cinema romances of all time. I had all the warm, fuzzy feelings watching their scenes together. The scene where they come back from the high school dance and he's wearing the football uniform and she's wearing the robe. There isn't a second of that isn't gold.
That is a fantastic meet cute.
I was grinning ear to ear. It was so well done. And I loved how they subverted that even a little bit by
having the death at the end?
By having the dad's stroke, yeah. So, I mean, that kind of worked with the whole theme of just...
Anytime he has something, it gets pulled away.
Yeah.
Because at the end of that, he was talking about how, I know what I'm doing tomorrow and every other day. I'm going on an adventure. I'm getting the heck out of this podunk town. I'm doing this and that. At which point I thought, dude, like, that is not what you tell somebody who's a potential romantic interest. Obviously, you're not going to be sticking around for them. That's a little hurtful. But we know that Mary's loved him since she was like 8.
And that was actually super sweet, too, watching them as kids. And when he bends over and Mary leans over the counter and she whispers that she will love him forever into his ear. And he doesn't
into his deaf ear.
Into his deaf ear. I know. Like, I honestly think I may not put this movie in again to watch it all the way through. I can see myself cherry-picking certain scenes.
Namely those 2 scenes.
Just to watch those scenes.
Them at the dance where, like, the devil comes by to open up the floor.
I swear that was Satan himself. That was Old Scratch. And I've got a key.
It was hilarious. Followed by something that is so super dangerous. Just so many people in full, like, tuxes all jumping into a swimming pool that's, like, 10 feet below without looking. And
pretty narrow.
How did nobody get, like, cracked on the head? And when you're covered in, like, a tuxedo swimming, I swam with just pants and socks on once. And it is heavy. I could not lift myself up onto a houseboat at the dock when I finally got there. I don't know how anybody here didn't drown.
And I mentioned just before that I may not throw this movie in to kind of watch it beginning to end and that I would cherry pick scenes. Partly because I enjoyed those scenes so much, but also partly because this movie is like 2 hours and 15 minutes long. I thought this was going to be maybe 100 minutes, 115 minutes. This is a long movie, man.
It was a long movie, and it was sort of almost in between feeling like too long and just right. There's a few scenes where they were important, but they just didn't keep you really gripped, or it didn't keep me really gripped. But they were important. It's not like I've seen 3-hour movies where I forget the time completely. And at the end of it, I'm like, oh, 3 hours went by? Here, I was noticing it, but at the same time, I don't think it was too long. I think it told the story the way it needed to be told, to an extent.
And even though there's probably a couple of scenes that you could shave out of it, the writing in those scenes is still impeccable. So I think that's why you don't begrudge the scenes. Like they don't feel tacked on. Nothing really feels extraneous.
Not at all. Although you did really kind of want to punch Potter in the face. So hard. And all of his groveling sycophants. I did find it amusing, though, when the one guy came in, his clerk or whatever, and he was demeaned by Potter, because Potter does that to everybody. And he's like, you know what? I think I might start looking for a job over at Bailey's company.
Oh, yeah. That was a good one. All right, so that's about all I've got to say on the movie.
And so now it comes down to what we actually thought. Classic, masterpiece, museum piece. What is it?
Considering the tone of the conversation for the last 15 or 20 minutes, I think people can probably guess where we're going to land with this one, but...
We'll go through the whole rigmarole anyway.
So, Dustin, museum piece or masterpiece for It's a Wonderful Life?
I am surprised that I enjoyed the movie this much. I almost always say that any movie that can bring a tear to my eye is a masterpiece and is worth looking at again and is worth other people looking at. I always thought that this movie was just something that was on all the time for no real good reason. And most people who I've talked to who've seen it, I don't think they've really paid much attention to it, more so that it was just something that happened to be on at Christmas time, maybe.
I don't know if a lot of people actually sit down and watch it beginning to end.
I think a lot of people might just have it on while they're making Christmas cookies or opening presents or chatting with family or dealing with other Christmas-related stresses. I'd say the best time to watch this movie is not at Christmas. If you're going to watch this movie, actually watch it. Because it is worth it. It is a good movie that has stood the test of time, and I think it will continue to do so.
So that's a masterpiece vote from Dustin?
That is a masterpiece vote from Dustin.
I will also throw in a masterpiece vote. I really enjoyed this movie. I didn't know if I was going to enjoy this movie. I had some hesitation actually going with masterpiece. I was going to say museum piece just because this movie does have a few little quirks. But as we discussed, they don't linger with you. You only really notice them or remember them if you decide to kind of go back and run it through your head. Or if you notice it while you're watching it, it goes away quite quickly. So I think with the sum being greater than its parts...
It just sort of squeaks right in there.
I think it walks quite casually over the line, but...
Not a whole lot of confidence in the walk, no swagger,
well,
but he ain't limping.
It was held up at customs, but it's been...
They made it in time for Christmas Day.
They did.
So, much like his brother, who somehow flew from New York to wherever the heck this place is in an hour, which, in a storm, is mind-boggling.
Well, I get the feeling that Bedford Falls is close to New York. They keep talking about New York as kind of the nearest city.
Even if someone was to say that I'm going to fly from, like, Manhattan to Jersey, would that take less than an hour? He would have had, like, a plane all gassed up out back. He was wearing his military clothes. Maybe he was on a base out in New York. We don't know. We invite you to figure that out for us, because that sounds like effort, and I don't want to do it.
And speaking of effort, we're pretty much done with ours. So that's a wrap on another episode of For Your Consideration. Hope you enjoyed it. You can check us out on Facebook or on the Twitter at FYC Show. If you have anything you need to say or any comments about It's a Wonderful Life, feel free to post them there. We're also on various other social media. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube. We are also on iHeartRadio and Stitcher. If you get the show off of iTunes, be sure to rate and review the show while you're there. The better the review, the happier we are.
And until next time, have yourselves a Merry Christmas. Merry Crimbo,
Christmas.
Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays. Merry Festivus.
A joyful holiday season from all of us here at For Your Consideration.
And happy working time for all you shift workers who get stuck working shift work throughout Christmas. Happy Tuesday. That's not today. That's not when we're releasing it. That is when some of you might listen to it, though. Happy Tuesday to you.
Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Ta-ta.
I keep saying I loved how his sycophant comes in and oh no, sorry, I thought that was the sycophant. That was the sheriff tearing up the warrant. We will cut that out.